Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Banterly, the Gen Z podcast about pop culture and media and everything in between. I'm Aidan.
And I'm Suha, and we're excited to have you with us this week. It's been kind of a crazy week in pop culture, Olympics, everything. So, is there anything specific on your mind lately?
I watched this show last week called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder on Netflix.
Oh, and just so you know, they got the wrong person.
What is it with you in this case?
The whole world thinks Celestine is guilty. It never made sense to me.
It's number one on Netflix, and I think it's been number one for the past week. It was good. It's one of those British murder mystery short series, which I always enjoy, and it had some nice twists. I was entertained. I liked the characters. It was a nice little watch if you're looking for something short and sweet. There's no cliffhanger at the end. It's all settled. It's just bada bing, bada boom. 8 episodes, I think.
Is that based off of a book? Why does that sound familiar?
It is based off of a book.
I don't think I ever read it, but I've seen it at Barnes & Noble. I think it was popular on Book Talk for a while.
It's good. I recommend. But what's on your mind this week?
I guess on the topic of things we're watching, I am rewatching The Crown for the fourth time. But this time I'm watching it with my mom, which has been very fun. It's her first time watching it. Every time I watch it, I go on history deep dives related to each of the episodes. What part of it was real? What's made up? It's been our little activity because we really can't be outside in the Southern California heat right now. The weather is not on our side, which is fine. So now let's get into our question of the day, a little bit off from what we've been talking about, but fun nonetheless. But Aidan, what is the wildest weather you've ever experienced?
Good question. This might be contrary to popular belief, but St. Louis gets all the seasons times 100. It's super hot in the summer, gets really cold, rainy springs, fall foliage, everything. And when I was in high school, there was a really bad snowstorm. We would get snow days and all that. That wasn't out of the ordinary, but this snowstorm was pretty rough. And so let me just set the scene for you all. My high school was located about 25 to 30 minutes, depending on traffic, from where I live. So I had to drive there, and my brother was there. So we drove together. And it was a joke because the headmaster of our school lived on campus. Everyone would joke that he never called snow days because his commute, he could just walk to school. On this day, it started snowing in the morning, and it was snowing, and all the other schools in St. Louis were calling off or calling a half day, but he didn't. And so I told my brother, as soon as it was 3 o'clock, I was like, we are driving home as soon as we can. And at this point, the roads were horrible. There was ice and snow everywhere. Traffic was horrible. So I was like, let me just take the back road all the way home. So I took the back road. I was slipping and sliding, and I was like, okay, it's actually safer if you drive on the highway because there's more cars, so the road gets warmer, so there's less ice. So I got on the highway, and I was pulling onto the highway, and I slid and hit the curb, and my brother's just looking at me really, Aidan? I'm like, Liam, I need you to be quiet because I was so stressed to drive home. So we get on the highway, and I'm slipping and sliding between lanes. I'm terrified. Get off the highway, and on this main road that stretches onto the road that I lived on, there was so much traffic that a drive that would normally take 5 minutes to get around took so long that my brother could start and finish Lady Bird. He watched the whole movie. It took us 4 hours to get home when it normally takes 25 to 30 minutes. I was so stressed the whole time. And my brother's just like, oh, I'm watching shows and la-di-da-di-da. And I'm over here but I got us home safely. I think about it. I'm like, oh my God, how did I do that? Because it was so scary. After that, he got a little bit more lenient with calling days off because people live farther than me. One of my friends lived an hour and a half from school, and she had to get home. And it's people have come from all over to go to school. So you got to be mindful of people's commute because it's not safe.
Yeah, no, Midwest principals are on a different level of dictatorship when it comes to calling snow days, because we had a similar thing in my school district where we joked that because he'd moved from Alaska, he was never going to give us snow days in Minnesota. I also drove like this 2003 Toyota Camry that is not made for that weather. I think they say that the safest thing is to take your hands off of everything and like don't hit the brakes too hard because that could cause something. So I relate. It's snowstorms are not for the weak and we should all just get to stay home.
How about you? Any other wild weather that you've experienced in the Midwest or beyond?
The polar vortex in Minnesota in 2019. It was like January, and for a whole week, the weather was so bad. It was like negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit, where like if you went outside for more than 2 minutes, you would experience like hypothermia. That year, we had gotten a super short winter break from our school, and we ended up getting that whole week off of school. We joked that it was like God's way of giving us an extra week of winter break.
My gosh. God's
Yeah, it was crazy.
On the topic of natural disasters, today we're going to be talking about not one, but two movies about tornadoes. Those are Twister, the 1996 classic, and the 2024 reboot Twisters. Have you ever experienced tornadoes being from the Midwest? Did you ever worry about those when you were growing up?
We had like monthly drills around tornadoes, and I think at one point there was one that we'd seen forming in the sky, but like it never touched down. I lived close enough to the Twin Cities where we were in an area of Minnesota that didn't get a lot, but like an hour south probably experienced a lot more than we did. You're kind of in like the middle of Tornado Alley down there in St. Louis. So what was that like?
It was fine. Missouri as a whole gets a lot of tornado activity. There was the big one in Joplin. At this point, it was over a decade ago. It was a devastating event. But in St. Louis, every time we would hear their tornado sirens, go down to the basement. We did that quite a bit, and our basement was really scary at the house I grew up in. So it's always a little bit just you're frightened because there might be a tornado, but you're also in this scary looking like basement. But there was one time we were down in the basement and I was tracking the tornado's movement and it looked like it was going to come straight for us. It never did. We were always fine. But we overlooked this area in St. Louis called the Chesterfield Valley. And I don't remember what year it was, but a tornado went through there, a small one. Fortunately, it never touched down on our backyard, but I was always so like it was always on my mind because every first Monday of every month, tornado drills. People don't get that. Oh,
It's like the weather surrounding tornadoes is also deeply frightening because it's like the sky turns a weird shade of green. It's so strange. So like the anticipation is incredibly frightening, especially when you are like sitting listening to like a radio or trying to track it on your phone. But let's dive into the movies. Let's start first with a quick summary of the original Twister, which was released in 1996 and directed by Jan de Bont.
And potentially could be a storm that has a winds in excess. Now, let's assume the worst at this point.
Joe! Bill! It's coming! Everybody underground now!
It follows storm tracers as they hunt down tornadoes. It focuses on Dr. Joe Harding, who, after losing her dad in an F5 tornado, the most severe kind, early in her life, she dedicated her life to researching and detecting tornadoes to try and prevent them from happening or kind of stop them in their midst. Bill, her ex-husband, returns to Oklahoma, trying to get her to sign divorce papers in the middle of tornado season so he can officially marry his new girlfriend, Melissa. The group then sets off with the divorce papers because he told Joe to sign them by the end of the day and she left with them. And it forces Joe and Melissa to kind of go with them so that they can get the papers. And it stars Helen Hunt, who played Dr. Joe Harding, Bill Paxton, who played her ex-husband, Bill Harding, Dr. Melissa Reeves, played by Jamie Gertz, and Dusty Davis, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman. And a fun fact about it is that it was actually one of the first ever films released on DVD.
Which is crazy. I would have assumed that DVDs were before then, because it's also weird to think that DVDs are basically extinct now, and 1996 is only 4 years before I was born. It's not so long ago, right?
I know. And DVDs, I feel like were such an integral part of our childhoods. Like, if you didn't have a movie on DVD, good luck, you're not watching it. Or you had to order the physical DVD from like Netflix or something. So it's kind of weird that, like, yeah, what was thought to be such unique technology now is like a thing of the past, but very minute. Like, it was only really relevant, I'd say, for 25 years.
Crazy. But what did you think of the movie?
I liked it a lot. I thought it was honestly like a perfect formula for that kind of movie, if that makes sense. Like, had a really stacked cast for the time, really good interactions and chemistry between all the characters. And for it being a 1996 movie, I expected the effects to be a lot worse. But like, they captured you. You felt entranced by it. Like, it felt really well done.
There's no time!
But it also transcended the time it was set in, if that makes sense. I kind of expected it to be like a true 90s kitschy fashion movie where you could place it specifically, but I think it aged really well.
I loved the characters in this, really made it for me. Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, Dusty, who was one of the members of the storm chasing group, was just so funny and so well acted. You really got the sense that this group is such a family, and I feel like they all had great chemistry. And like you said, I was thrilled the whole time, even though it was 1996. The tornadoes looked pretty good, and it was funny with the cows flying, and it was a good movie. I had never even heard of it. Like, I had never heard of this movie before the new one come out, and then I told my mom. She was like, "Oh my god, a classic." I was like, "Classic? I guess I live under a rock because I know a lot of movies from the '90s and '80s. It's not like I don't, but I had never heard of Twisters before."
Yeah, I felt the same way. I hadn't heard of it either. Like, I was confused when I heard that this new one was like a reboot. I was like, how can it be a reboot of something I've never heard? But I also thought that the movie did a fantastic job of with the characters and their chemistry really feeling like a blockbuster, if that makes sense. Like, I think it came out in an age where like, and today still I'd argue movies are still huge productions, but they feel like they're coming out so frequently nowadays that maybe casts don't get as much time to like build that chemistry. That this one, it felt truly like this is the one movie we're all making in 1996. And so they had the time to prepare, to really delve into it, to build that chemistry that made it feel so familial and like they had known each other for years.
Yeah, I agree. Like, the chemistry that they all had, you could really feel it, and it felt like one big family. But one person who didn't feel like she was in that family, Melissa, the fiance of Bill, who's again trying to get divorced. She's played by this actress named Jamie Gertz. And I randomly this past week went on a deep dive search about Jamie Gertz because I saw a TikTok about her that she's like the wealthiest actress, but nobody knows who she is. She's worth $7 billion. She got married to this man in the 90s who ended up starting this really big hedge fund, and they own like the Atlanta Seahawks or something. But it wasn't just his money. Like, when she would make money, she would invest in like buying investment properties back then instead of just like Wahoo spending at Hollywood lifestyle. I had no idea she was in Twisters. At this point, I had never seen the old Twisters. But it's funny that she was in this. I could see myself in her character because those people are crazy. I think anybody who follows tornadoes like this is insane. Point blank period. And I kind of identified with her in the car screaming, being like, what? Who am I about to marry? Who is this man? Why is he doing this?
Like, when she first showed up on screen, I expected her to kind of be like a Parent Trap, like stepmom character or Legally Blonde's villain. Like, I thought she was gonna be uppity, not play into it, but I thought for what she was getting herself into, she was an incredibly good sport about, like, just hanging around her fiance's ex-wife. And so, yeah, by the end, I felt super bad for her. Like, she broke up with Bill so that he could reunite with Joe because she heard them talking over the radio and they didn't know. And I just felt like she went through all that trauma of not only dating that man, but also experiencing these crazy tornadoes with little to no warning with people she did not know, only to leave manless and in Oklahoma, which I don't think anyone should have to. Yeah, I was just sitting with that. Like, I could not imagine a worse situation than being in Oklahoma and having lost my man to his ex-wife. But also, Bill was kind of an asshole because who proposes to someone before they're even officially divorced?
I did wish we knew more about their relationship, Bill and Joe. Like, how long ago was it that they split up? How long were they together? That was one thing I wish we had more of.
Yeah, like, why are they getting divorced? Also, why has the divorce not been finalized if this man has had enough time to go and find a new woman that he wants to marry? Unless he cheated on her, but that's also information that I think as an audience we would have liked. I don't know. In this kind of situation where we're supposed to be rooting for one woman over the other, I'd like to know why, because now I just feel sad for Melissa.
Nobody likes to be the third wheel. And nobody likes to be the third wheel while surrounded by tornadoes.
And crazy people who drive into tornadoes. Like, there's truly no worse condition one could find themselves in.
No, 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 no. Sorry, Melissa.
At least you're a billionaire.
I know. Melissa's just laughing at the bank now. That's all that I can say. Bill who?
She said, who? Bill who? Yeah, they're still in Oklahoma chasing tornadoes. I'm out here getting my money up.
Let's flash forward to 2024.
Guys, whatever's in there, it's big and it's moving fast. Drive.
Go, go, go! Guys, you gotta get out of here. Do you hear me?
This one was directed by Lee Isaac Chung and has similar themes to the original one, but new cast, new technology, no direct connection to the old one, but similar ideas. So the main character, Kate, was played by Daisy Edgar Jones. Her boyfriend and two friends were killed by a tornado because Kate was experimenting with this technology that could stop a tornado in its tracks. After that tragedy of her friend and boyfriend dying, she moves to New York, and we meet her again 5 years later. Her old friend Javi, played by Anthony Ramos, comes and he's like, hey, I'm working with this company. We're doing AI technology to measure tornadoes. You're really good at feeling the weather. You can track when they're going to come. Come back to Oklahoma. Help me with this. So she does. When she gets back, she meets Tyler Owens and his group of crazy little storm chasers, kind of like a ragtag band of I don't want to call them misfits, but they're not as polished compared to this fancy corporate company that Javi, Kate's friend, is now working for. She then realizes that Javi's company and his corporate backing don't have the well-intentioned goals that she thought they did, and begins a little romantic flirt with Tyler Owens, who was played by Glenn Powell.
Glenn Powell, the man you are.
Gotta love him, honestly. I will always think of Glenn Powell as Scream Queens, and that was 2015, almost 10 years ago. And then I feel like he kind of disappeared, and then all of a sudden he's everywhere. Anyone But You, Hitman, Twisters, like
He was in one of my favorite rom-coms, Set It Up, in like 2018, I think. And I've loved him ever since. But yeah, he's great in this movie. I thought the cast did generally pretty well. I think this one trended a lot on TikTok because of the 40X experience. And I want to know how you watched it and like if that changed how you think you felt about the movie at the end.
you mentioned a couple episodes ago that you saw it in the whole 40X. Well, I've been in Maine for the past 2 weeks, and I don't think that exists in this state, unfortunately. So I went to this old theater in downtown Portland, Maine, and It was a small theater, it was an old theater. I didn't even have a reclining chair, so it hadn't been renovated in a while. There was a couple in front of me and then a family with, like, 2 kids to my left, and that was it in the whole theater. And I can't imagine what this would have been like in 40X because I was already on the edge of my seat really the whole entire time, but I laughed, I was stressed, and mainly I cried. I shed quite a few tears, not just in the end, but the whole movie. I was in and out of tears, and I don't know what it was. I think I was a little bit nostalgic because it kinda reminded me of, like, oh, like, growing up in the Midwest, but I was crying. How was it with, the 40X experience?
It was different. I'll start there. So for those who might not know, 40X is like a movie immersive experience where you get moving chairs, chairs that are shaking, moving about, like you think you're going to fall out of your seat. There's a water function, there's smoke and air, and like a lot involved with it all. Like you feel everything. And I think because of that experience and that I like my group had seen it on TikTok and then we went while I was in San Francisco, it read much more like a comedy. The entire theater was constantly laughing, constantly whooping at Glenn Powell, like in his cowboy hat, backwards cap, in his white t shirt. During the moments where it felt like there was a weird love triangle between Javi, Tyler, and Kate, everyone was dying in their seats laughing. Like, no one could take it seriously. I honestly really enjoyed it and I loved the plot and I think I would have liked it regardless if I'd seen it that way. But I think that movie going experience made it just feel a little bit unserious. And I think when you're in such a communal experience too where the people 3 rows behind you are laughing, then you kind of feel like you should too. But I literally thought I was going to fall out of my seat. At one point I think I did cuz they do not treat you gently during those big tornado scenes in those seats.
Was anybody crying, or was that just a me experience?
No one was treating it as a drama or thriller. Everyone was just treating it like a straight
Wow.
comedy. Like anytime someone got sucked up into the tornado, people erupted into laughter. It was laughs on laughs. But I know when we were getting ready for this episode, you had mentioned that you really loved the soundtrack of the movie.
As soon as the songs were playing in the background, I literally was thinking to myself, "I'm about to be listening to this on my way home," and it was so funny that I walked out of the theater. It was, like, raining and thundering out, so I had to walk 10 minutes home in the rain and thunder. I was like, "This is so perfect." So I put on the soundtrack. I'm listening to Ain't No Love in Oklahoma. Like, the water's going through, I'm wearing sandals, I'm unprepared, water, I'm like, listening to this hardcore country music. Country music is my favorite genre, and every song I was like, "This is just so good." The scene when they were at the rodeo with the bull riding, I was like, I've been to that before, and I was like, "Wow, this is so heartwarming." I love country music. I loved the soundtrack, but what can I say?
I thought it was a good soundtrack. I think my only qualm was that at some points it felt just a little too like on the nose and literal. Like there was the one scene that really had my group up in laughs was when Kate was walking into her mom's house wearing like an American flag denim jacket and another song about Oklahoma came on. It was sung I think by Lainey Wilson.
Take the home out of Oklahoma. It's where my soul was born to be.
And we just like couldn't contain ourselves. And so I think that was my issue. I was like, this feels a little too literal, but I didn't dislike it.
That's part of the beauty of country music is it is very literal. It's very like storytelling. Like a lot of the chick songs, it's just like them saying a story, and then that's the music, and it's really on the nose. There's no hidden meanings, no Easter eggs like Taylor Swift music.
The album, I will say, is quite stacked, like in terms of the performers. With like it starts with like the "Ain't No Love in Oklahoma" song is like Luke Combs. There's Miranda Lambert, Thomas Rhett. Did you know that Mason Ramsey has a song on this album?
No, I didn't.
It's called Shake Shake.
Just have to cut loose, so shake, shake. Let's go crazy, shake, shake. Ooh, sweet baby, when you take
watching this movie. I felt really hardcore, and I'm proud to be an American. Like that was running through my blood. What would it have been like to watch it if you weren't American and kind of that international reception?
I think it would feed every stereotype you already think about Americans. I think you're like, see the Glenn Powells of the world, like in this specific context.
Folks, how you feeling? I'm feeling pretty good, man. And if you feel it, I said if you feel it, stay safe.
That's what I imagine Americans to be like. But I had a hard time, I think, believing that Daisy Edgar Jones was a woman from Oklahoma. Maybe that affects the international reception. Like, she's British, so maybe the Brits go to their theaters and are like, ha ha ha, look at our girl, like mimicking those dumb Americans.
Her accent was so in and out. That was one of the notes. I was in the theater. I took out my phone. I wrote down accent. No.
Like, it didn't feel believable that she grew up in rural Oklahoma. I was like, no, like, look at you. You didn't know. You're wearing a turtleneck under a button up. Let's be so real right now. Like, you are giving London, you're giving New York.
Two cells to the west are fighting over the same inflow. They'll choke each other out. This one to the east is the sky all to herself. Moisture, wind shear, instability.
We can get into one of the controversial things of this movie, which is like, should Glenn and Daisy have kissed at the end of the movie? Personally, I was okay with the way it ended because I kind of love believing that the love triangle lives on and that like maybe one day she's with Javi, like maybe one day she's with Tyler. And what woman wouldn't want that? Should they have kissed, in your opinion?
I think I agree with you. I like the kind of we don't know what's going to happen ending. Did you notice how it was sort of similar in the original where they kind of weren't going to kiss and they came and then they were like, oh, guys, we're not going to look. And then they ended up kissing at the very end. I kind of it was very reminiscent of that. Like, oh, are they going to kiss? Are they not? And then they didn't, but it was still, it was so cute. It's making me tear up. It was so nice.
Having watched both now, first, which one did you prefer? And second, did they make you feel similarly?
I was thrilled and at the edge of my seat for both of them. I think being in the theater for the new one and seeing it on the big screen made it even more thrilling. And of course, the CGI is a little bit better. But even watching it on my little TV in my room, the old one, I was still like, oh my gosh. But I do think overall, we do get a lot deeper with the characters in the new movie. I feel like we understand that we don't have a whole lot of questions like we did in the old one where how long have they been separated? When did Melissa and him get together? We don't ask those types of questions in the new one. We get to know them deeper. But the campiness and that nostalgic thrill of the old one, it just got my heart. And I also thought overall the actors did a better job. I thought Glenn Powell did a good job in the new one, but everybody in the old one I thought was really, really good. So that's my take. Which one did you prefer?
I think that's fair. I think I did prefer the new one. I think I watched it in an unfair way of like when I went to see it in 40X, it truly felt like an entire experience. Whereas I watched the old one on my computer and I really enjoyed it still. I agree that I think the old cast felt more normal, attainable, perhaps like that felt like a group of people you really could see in that situation, whereas the new one just felt like all of the characters were maybe a little out of place. I think Glenn Powell was probably the best actor among them. Anthony Ramos, beautiful to look at, but he did read some of his lines like a theater guy. That's what his training is. Hopefully he'll improve, but he was like, we've got to get on the road. And you're like, okay, calm it down. Calm it down, Usnavi. We're not in the Heights right now. Calm it down, John Lawrence. So I don't know. I think generally though, like for the whole blockbuster experience of it all, I did enjoy the newer one.
They were both great. I'm surprised how much I enjoyed the new one, honestly. I walked out of there being like, I could totally go see that movie again.
So I know that the old one's your favorite, but on a Letterboxd scale from 1 star to 5, what would you rate both of them?
I would give the old one a 4.5, and then I would give the new one a 3.95. Almost a 4, but I wanted a little bit more separation, but it's still in the threes. Still really good in my opinion. Like that's almost an 80%. Like you're passing.
Okay, I can see this. No, I needed to sit with it. The 0.95 confused me. I can't think that way. But I gave my 40X experience a 5 stars because I think it just like was truly immersive. Giving the actual movie, the 2024 one, I'd probably give it a 4 stars. Yeah, 4 stars. Old one maybe 3.5. Just because I thought that the relationship plot points that drove the story were not well addressed. And that's like my main qualm. If the tornadoes were the true center of the story, maybe we'd be different. But they weren't, and we just have to live with that.
Valid. Well, I hope our streams put a little bit more coin in Jamie Gertz's pocket. She gets royalties from that. Have you seen any funny Letterboxd or Rotten Tomatoes reviews on the movies?
I reviewed the 2024 one on my Letterboxd, and all I wrote was just, if Glenn Powell is waiting on the other side of a tornado for me, I will be there and present. Like, point blank period, as you would say, Aidan. There is nothing stopping me. You could put 10 tornadoes there. And then another one I saw was, like, sarcastically, like, was, holy shit, she did it. That crazy son of a bitch did it. She cured tornadoes. Which I thought was just so funny. And then the last one about the 1996 version was, watched in 4D. I turned on the electric fan on the highest setting. Intense. People are so funny, but what about you? Which one's caught your eye?
One was guys will say they know a spot and then drive you into a tornado. That's crazy. And then one that really resonated with me because I love the music was the Asian guy behind me said white ass soundtrack, which is so true. It was a very the caucasity of the soundtrack was prevalent, but I still enjoyed it. Yeehaw.
Yeah, it's fun to see what other people think, and I'm happy it's become like TikTok, like Letterboxd, Twitter, all that kind of stuff trend. Let us know what you thought about both these movies. Share your thoughts with us banterly at immigrantlypod.com and engage with us on our socials, Immigrantly Media on Instagram and at Immigrantly Podcast on TikTok.
Banterly is produced by Shay Yu, written by us, the co-hosts Suha Musa and Aidan Taylor. The executive producer and editorial review is done by Sadia Khan.
Our sound designer and editor is Lou Raskin. The Banterly theme music is by Simon Hutchinson, and additional music is by Epidemic Sound. See y'all next week.